Welcome to the second episode of the History of English series. If you enjoyed this episode, at some point during the video, could you click on the like button, and even better, the like and subscribe button. Okay, let's get started. Over a period of 300 years, from the early 5th century, the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms had been founded in what is now more or less the area of modern England. By the late 8th century, these kingdoms had converted to Christianity, and some of them, in particular Wessex and Northumbria, had become great centres of learning. However, as the old saying goes, all good things come to an end, and in the late 700s, a new population started to make its presence felt all over Europe, and in particular in the British Isles. These populations came from Scandinavia, and they were generally referred to as the Vikings. This is Holy Island, which is in the North Sea off the northeast coast of England in the county of Northumberland. Behind me are the ruins of the monastery of Lindisfarne. Today, these ruins are visited by tourists who probably then go on to have cream teas or pub lunches on the island. However, in the year 793, Lindisfarne was one of the most important centres of learning in the kingdom of Northumbria, which existed at that time, and was probably one of the most important centres of learning in the whole of Europe. There were no tourists, cream teas, or pub lunches. In this year, any tourists, if they had existed, would have been well advised to stay as far away from this place as possible, because in the year 793, the first recorded attack by the Vikings occurred from the pirates from across the North Sea. Now, all over the world, the term Vikings tends to conjure up an image of guys in strange horned or winged helmets, plundering and raping their way across the countryside. And this is an image that I grew up with at school. It is not really known why the Vikings suddenly decided to rampage across Western Europe, the Mediterranean, and even as far as North America. In reality, Viking is a verb. It is an action, as in the ing form in modern English. So when these people went Viking, it meant they went raiding instead of trading. So Viking was the activity of raiding other territories. Although Viking is not technically correct, it's the term that everybody uses, so I will use it also here. The Vikings who invaded parts of the British Isles, and in particular England, predominantly came from Denmark and Norway. Certainly the Anglo-Saxons tended to refer to them as Danes. Before moving on, there's another myth which we need to debunk. Vikings certainly did not wear horned or winged helmets, and the reason is very, very simple. They were not idiots. The purpose of a helmet in battle is to protect your head against projectiles and sharp objects like swords. If you look at any armour, whether it's body armour or the armour of a tank, you will see that it's dominated by curved surfaces, for the simple reason that it reduces the impact of any weapon. Anyone stupid enough to go into battle wearing a helmet that has protuberances like horns or wings will have a very short battle indeed, as the first enemy they face will simply knock the helmet off their head. Over the next 70 years, after the Lindisfarne raid, the Vikings raided with impunity all over the British Isles, and when they raided, they generally killed everybody they found and took anything of value. And this gave an even greater sense of horror at their presence. Eventually, the Vikings came to the conclusion that the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms were not really very good at defending themselves. So instead of raiding, they decided to take the land itself. In a period of 5 years, from the year 865, the Vikings conquered most of Northumbria, the northeastern part of Mercia, the kingdom of East Anglia, and parts of Kent. Only the kingdom of Wessex held out. Very few people would have bet on the survival of the English language, as it seemed almost inevitable that sooner or later Wessex, like all the other kingdoms, would fall. What they needed was a hero, and just at the right moment, a hero arrived. The new king of Wessex was called Alfred, and didn't seem to be very promising king material, as he was more of a scholar than a warrior. But sometimes appearances are deceptive, and over several years, Alfred managed to lead his people against the Danes and fight them to a standstill. The Danish leader Guthrum was defeated, and the peace of sorts was established. Effectively, the territory that is now England was divided into the Anglo-Saxon southwest and the Danish northeast. The Danish northeast was known as Danelaw because Danish law applied there. Now, this is a massive simplification, but to give you the full story would take hours. In theory, it was forbidden for people to travel between the two territories except for trade. In reality, people travelled for many reasons, and the two populations began to mingle. Not only did the people mingle, but also the languages. Danish and Old English, or perhaps we could say Old Norse and Old English, were both Germanic languages. And English, instead of being taken over by Old Norse, began to absorb a lot of Old Norse vocabulary. And despite the mingling of the languages, there are distinct words and names that are peculiar to the Old Danelaw even today. Let's start with place names. The suffix of these place names are found almost exclusively in the northeast of England. For example, by or be meant farm. For example, Selby, Derby, and Wetherby. Thorpe meant village. We have Scunthorpe, Mablethorpe, and Netherthorpe, and there are many, many other examples. Anyone who has any familiarity with Scandinavian countries will know that the suffix son on surnames is very, very common and means the son of a person. This suffix is also used extensively in England, and it is more common in the Old Danelaw. Names like Thompson, Johnson, Timson, Hobson, etc. And there are many, many more. If you look at this map of the city centre of York, you can see that a lot of the street names contain the suffix gate. We have here Petergate, Davygate, Colliergate, and so on. And this is a common characteristic in many northeastern cities, particularly in Yorkshire. Some people imagine that here gate means gate, but in fact it doesn't. It comes from the Old Norse word gata, meaning street. And in fact, in modern Danish, gade means street as well. And so, in effect, when we say Davygate, it means Davy Street. Oh, and by the way, there was no McDonald's in York city centre in those days. Don't be silly. Some Old Norse words were absorbed into English, and either they kept the same meaning or sometimes they coexisted alongside the similar Anglo-Saxon word, but with a slightly different meaning. A typical example of this is the classic Anglo-Saxon sh sound compared to the Viking Old Norse sk sound. So, for example, we have ship, Anglo-Saxon word, skib was a Viking word, and in modern English we have ship, but we have skipper. Another similar example of this would be shirt and skirt, which once meant the same thing. These days they don't, and please do not confuse the two. Another example where two words have the same meaning but have different origins are these. An Anglo-Saxon might be sick, whereas a Viking might be ill. An Anglo-Saxon might have a craft, but a Viking might have a skill. Although King Alfred is often credited as being the first king of England, this is debatable, and I don't think it can be said to be absolutely true. However, it's safe to say that he sowed the seeds of a united England, and gradually England was united, sometimes having Anglo-Saxon kings like Edmund, sometimes Danish, the most famous being King Canute, who was King of England, Denmark, and Norway at the same time. London started to be used more like a capital rather than the old capital of Wessex, which was Winchester. And the story might have ended here, but guess what? Yes, you've guessed it, there was another invasion. And this invasion had another profound effect on the English language. But that's the subject of the next video. Bye for now.